I'm Jean, and this is Perfect Flow. I'm a New Zealand-based athlete and coach focused on optimizing performance, health, and well-being. While I have a professional background in biomedical engineering, I've chosen to follow my more immediate passions for running, endurance, adventure, movement, nutrition, lifestyle, community, psychology, and personal growth. My goal in starting this podcast is to connect with bright minds to extract the information I need to live a life that makes sense and feels good, and share those conversations with others. Apart from your favorite podcast app, the best places to follow my work are perfectflow.nz, genebeveridge.nz, and Perfect Flow on Facebook. Hi everyone, I'm back with another Orienteer. Today I'm talking with Jean Cory-Wright. So I've had the pleasure of staying with Jean while I was in Christchurch recently, and of course I managed to ambush her and get her to sit down and share some of her precious time, because of course she is writing a book at the moment and she's very busy with work. So it was great for her to spare some time and share a lot of wisdom with us. For those of you that don't know Jean quite as well as the rest of the Orienteers my age and younger, Jean is also known as Mama J. And Mama J because her and I often end up on coaching trips together, and of course our names, although written differently, are said exactly the same. So she ends up being Mama J and I end up being Papa G, it seems. So we've had a lot of time together as coaches, and before then we spent a lot of time as she was not explicitly my coach, but someone in the community who would be always offering advice and wisdom on training and racing for orienteering. So she's had a big part in my development as an athlete, and she's really interested in psychology. So we go down rabbit holes quite regularly about how to approach the mental and emotional aspects of sport. And today we jump back in time and we get to hear a little bit about what her experiences as a junior in the UK were like, and how she got thrust onto the elite scene at such a young age and how she handled that. We hear about her training as an elite in the UK and managing the other areas of her life. We talk about injuries and setbacks. We talk about coaching and how to communicate ideas to other people. And this is a big area of interest for her, and this is the topic of her book that she's writing at the moment. And we get into a lot of the areas that she's really interested in putting down on paper. So we're looking forward to that book coming out soon, and I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Jean,
Hi.
welcome to Perfect Flow. What does Perfect Flow mean to you?
Perfect flow is actually a psychological theory, so it means quite a lot more than orienteering. It's when you're in the zone with anything. So it could be in a workplace, or it could be on a race, or it could be climbing a mountain, or even baking a cake. You get into a flow state when everything's working and you're not having to consciously think too hard and you're focused.
Yeah. Is there a difference between being kind of in that state where things are happening very autonomously compared to when you're very consciously in control?
Yes, there is, but it depends on the thing you're doing. So, for example, if I was baking a cake, I wouldn't need to think so much and I'd just get in the zone of baking a cake. Same with me if I'm teaching, actually. I don't have to think as much and I can just get in the zone of that. But if I'm doing something, like skiing down something hard or something like that, then I have a bit more conscious control.
Yeah. So context dependent. It's not a black and white thing. No. You might notice that you have
very context dependent.
Yeah. The more, and also the more practiced you are at something, what feels like flow at one stage, when you're maybe more beginner at a certain task, you might get like years down the track, you might find that more and more of these processes become autonomous, and you find a greater degree of flow. So it's not something you just snap into.
No,
it's very much just that you go deeper and deeper.
And so I think in orienteering, in a serious race, to get into that zone, I am definitely quite conscious thinking.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm really thinking and applying all the techniques I need to do that. Yeah, so maybe with doing a sport-related thing, it's needs more focus and concentration. And doing something more like baking a cake or teaching a lesson, it can loosen off a bit.
I think about musical instruments quite a lot, and
Yeah,
that becomes very autonomous. You're just a few cues here and there, and there's a lot of muscle memory and a lot of practice, and made it very flowy.
Yes.
I also think about us going orienteering for the first time a month or so ago, of course after a long period of lockdowns and having no activity, and just realizing how rusty we all were, and how things that I've taken for granted were just not happening.
Yes.
And I was making kind of mistakes that I wouldn't usually make. But I think what stood out to me the most was that it wasn't that I was thinking less. It's that things were just not going to plan, because a lot of those processes were subconscious.
Yeah.
They never required thinking in the past 4 years. I've never had 6 months off orienteering completely, and having that period off orienteering meant that when I came back in, those subconscious processes took half an hour to start happening again. And it's not that I was thinking more 12 months ago. It's just that those things were actually subconscious and disappeared. So that was a really good reminder of exactly what we're trying to do when we're practicing, trying to get these things from conscious to a subconscious level, where we're just ticking off these cues, and the process kind of follows beyond that point.
For me, for orienteering, I get into that state better when I'm actually working by the book and doing all the right things, using this technique here and that technique there, and pulling myself up here or whatever. Because I'm so absorbed in doing that I don't see anyone else, and I don't think about how long I've taken or who I'm behind, or all the stuff that gets in the way of flow is that kind of stuff. It's that emotional, psychological stuff. Whereas things that help me are the cognitive things. I'm just thinking about what I have to do. Where am I going, and how am I going to get there? And if I'm thinking that through, I can get into that flow in orienteering very easily. So it's about using the cognitive brain over the emotional bit of the brain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Sometimes I'm trying to get to a place where a lot of the cognitive load has been kind of offset to a more emotional load. Obviously, you've got to have it practiced so that it doesn't go haywire when you push it to a more emotional state. But then if things go wrong, they go really wrong, because they're not in... so there's a bit of a balance there. That I definitely struggle with. It's probably one of the hardest things. In sport.
Because your emotion, an emotion is the feeling and sensation, the sensation effectively. The feeling is the meaning your cognitive brain gives to that sensation. And so, and anything that's going on, whether it's us talking now or me baking a cake or doing first aid like I was doing before, is flicking between those two zones constantly. And it's about being able to get into the right zone for what you're doing. So if I'm just teaching and I want to be creative, I need to have more of an emotional zone going on. If I'm doing an orienteering race that's important, I go back into the cognitive zone. But if I'm doing an orienteering race that I'm just having a bit of fun for the day, I'll be more in the emotional zone.
And you find that getting the cognitive stuff more at the front of your mind helps everything else flow behind it? Is that what you were
totally does.
saying before? Okay. Cool. Well, that's really interesting. I'd love to talk about that stuff more. Can we jump back in time?
To
when you were, not even, I wish I was younger and could say when you were in my position, but now I'm a senior as well. But back to when you were a junior. When did you discover orienteering and adventure sports and running more generally?
Okay. So we always did stuff with the family. From the UK, went up to the Lake District. That's the nearest bit of mountains. My dad was into all sorts, so we did mountain walking, climbing, sailing, kayaking and whatnot. And he did an orienteering course for teachers. He was a teacher. So he came back from that saying, this is great fun, we should go and do it. So we did. And I remember going as an 11-year-old with my mum, but after a while I got bored and grabbed the map off her and took over. So I picked it up quite quickly. I had a sort of bit of a propensity for understanding the map. So Mum and I would go together a few times, and then in the end I said, can I go on my own? So I went on my own. And there weren't many girls of 11, 12, 13 doing it in Britain at the time, so I did quite well in the big scheme of things and went along to the British Champs and did quite well. And I got on a trip, a British team trip when I think I was a W15. They used to call it 15 then, not 16. So I was W15 and we went to Hungary, which was very exciting because it was an unusual place. And that was great. That hooked me because it was socially good fun. It was a new place. And I actually won the Hungarian 5 days in W15 that year. And yeah, so it was quite an achievement as well. And I remember running those races. They were fairly short and fairly easy. Wouldn't know whether they were orange or red courses, but yeah, I remember the chasing stars because these Hungarians had some pretty fast people. And there was a fast person who I'd noted from the other courses who was 2 minutes behind me, and that kept me focused.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had to keep focusing on, don't think about her, don't think about running fast, just get these controls. And it got me through, and I won the chasing start. So that was cool.
Cool. I think sometimes it takes some victory early on to spark a real kind of engagement with the sport. At least that was my case as well. Is
Right.
that I was either Orienteering was kind of it was something that we did, and it wasn't until I had that like taste of success, like if you do things, if you put things in place and practice and get things right, it's really cool to win.
Yeah.
Do you recall that being like a spark, or were you already really into it?
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the puzzle. I enjoyed the puzzle and the sort of challenge of finding the controls and reading the map properly. Mm-hmm. So that got me interested. And it was the trips I got to go on.
Right.
More than any victories. So if I did well within Britain, I got to go to a European country for a week or 2 weeks in the summer.
With a team of
With a
other
team.
people at the same age, yeah.
Yeah, and that was fun. And so I wanted to do that so I'd get in the team.
Yeah.
That was definitely part of it.
And what else was around at that stage when you were a junior in the UK?
Yeah, so we'd have a British Champs. We had several weekend events. Britain was ticking along quite well then, actually. We had a junior tour trip go every year to Europe, and then they started the squad in 1976. So I was in that as how old was I? 17. We didn't have any junior squads or anything. We had this junior trip that went every year, and I was in that 74, 75, 76. Yeah, so you know, I was technically very competent, and also I didn't get flustered very much. So where other people were doing bloopers and losing 10 minutes or 5 at least, I was losing 1 or 2. So that was my strength, really.
Yep, and you noticed that as in the form of like a natural talent quite early on? There was some predispositions there that you think might have helped?
At the time, I have no idea why, but I just noticed that the others got more flustered than I did.
Yeah. 1
or 2 of them who were much better runners, and it was sort of secret enjoyment underneath for me to go, I don't actually run as fast as them, but I always beat them because I just outthink them, and that was quite appealing. That was like that's what you do in this sport. You run well, but you don't need to be full on, and you get the orienteering right.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then was there a junior squad that could pull you through into elite competitions
We didn't
around?
have one at the time. I just went on those junior trips, but we did have a senior squad when I was in it at 17.
Okay. So you don't need the junior squad at that stage.
Well, there was not that many. There were probably 8 women in it, and they were from, there was Carol McNeil, who's also did very well. She would have been about mid-30s by then, so we were a big age range, yeah. And I was the youngest, yeah.
So that kind of minority sport kind of vibe where you end up with a very diverse squad.
Yeah.
Which can be really cool if you're a junior suddenly making contact with these very experienced people.
Yeah, yeah.
And then when did you do your first serious elite competitions?
So I ran the World Champs when I was 17.
Wow. That seems crazy now.
In Scotland. It was in Scotland that time. So that's quite cool because it was local and I'd been in the kind of area that it was like. The year before that, I didn't even know what the World Champs was, and somebody said to me, you should trial for the World Champs. And I thought just anyone could go and enter, a bit like the British Champs. We just go and pay our money and go to the World Champs. Then I found you had to do trials. So we had them, and I got in. And it was good, but it was very much an experience. It was in Downaway Forest. It was...
I've been there.
Yeah, I had a big mistake on the long distance run. 20 minutes I lost. 20 minutes on one control. And I kept going in. No, I just really annoyed with myself.
Yeah.
Kept going in from the different attack points, and it was just one of those vague sort of depression-y things, and there were lots of them. So that was a good lesson.
And what are the highlights of your...
So I went on and the World Champs was every 2 years then. So I was hooked on going to that because as well as trying to do well, there was the whole meeting of all these people from all over the world. That was exciting. And going to very cool places with cool terrain and things. So I trialled for that every time it came up. In between there was World Universities, and I went to that. I think I went to that twice. Yeah. And again, one time in that, I was fourth in that. That was my best position in World University, so I was pretty happy with that. Up in Switzerland in the alpine hilly terrain. I did a Swiss 5-day before the Swiss World Champs, which they had an E1 and an E2. It was quite interesting because they limited E1 just because there was the World Champs was going to be there. They had only 60 people could go in that. So we had, I don't think we got in Britain in that. So I was in E2, but I managed to win E2. So I was pretty happy with that.
Okay.
But did the World Champs every 2 years. And then when I started working, I was working in the outdoors. It was quite hard to train properly. I could stay generally fit, but doing all the full-on intervals and technical training was difficult. So I tended to...
Did you find that you were just tired after being on your feet?
No, the physical work wasn't too hard. It was just the World Champs was only every 2 years, so I was quite happy not to have a year where I just ticked over and didn't go for it. I was quite happy that was the way it was. So I was able to go to the World Champs every 2 years because it only happened every 2 years. And then in the years between, I didn't really do that much of orienteering. I did other things like mountains and skiing and sailing and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
So generally quite fit, and then a concerted effort in running and orienteering every second year before the champs. Yes. Yeah.
That's pretty much why I probably kept going a long time, because I didn't get sick of it because it was only every 2 years. Yeah.
Right, both mentally, and I was also going to ask about any setbacks you had during that time. I mean, injuries is the most common kind of setback.
Yeah, I was.
And maybe that comes from like compressing training too much for some people, and
I was quite lucky.
You were very balanced and kind of conservative in some ways.
I think so. I think I was quite lucky with doing that and not having... I had twisted ankles often because I had a bad ankle, and I used to just strap it. It didn't really stop me from training. So, no, I was able to give every second year its best shot.
Yeah.
And then we started doing World Cups in the years in between.
Oh, yeah.
Can't remember when that was. It might have been about 87 or
Was that 88. A series of races back then?
Yes. And I did them. I trained enough and got in the team to do them, but I never did a whole year of series because it was like 3 trips.
Yeah.
And I did okay in them, but they definitely weren't what I was aiming for.
And you could see the difference in your performance between those World Cup races that you hadn't done a really big push for, and the World Champs, which you had done a concerted effort, both physically and emotionally, into that one race.
Yeah.
Cool. And when did you first get into coaching?
So when I was teaching, you see, I was teaching in outdoor centres and teaching in schools. So at the outdoor centre, we used to teach beginners. And so that's where I got into
teach navigation to beginners?
No, we taught orienteering.
Oh, orienteering specifically.
We taught tramping and nav as well. But there were two courses, an orienteering one, tramping one, kayaking one, whatever. And we got into creating that list of techniques at that place back in 1982. And creating a week-long course for kids, which really got them up to speed with doing what I would call orange courses these days. But it was in the UK, they had a different colour code system. Okay. Yeah, so I was teaching that and working out how do they learn best, that kind of stuff. Yeah. At that stage, I wrote a book with Carol McNeil and Tom Renfrew, because I then went into school and started teaching PE, geography and stuff, but I also had a lot of material on how to teach young kids or to orienteer, not just young, but anyone really, but it was aimed at primary school and secondary school kids. That's where it was aimed.
And how do you tailor that to that age group?
We wrote a book which it was a section in the classroom, a section in the school grounds, a section in the local park. There were no sprint maps then, so it was all a school map that we'd sort of drawn with whatever symbols fitted at the time. And then a visit to a forest where there was a permanent course kind of thing. So it was a teacher's book. They could grab it, look at how you might teach things, and there was a whole series of lessons.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. You've got non-orienteer teachers teaching orienteering.
Yeah.
And that was working.
Yeah, so I was
that's pretty good that you can communicate the right things to somebody with less experience, because orienteering is very confusing to communicate, and it can be done really quite poorly. It's hard. I really do find it quite hard to communicate the essence of orienteering to someone who hasn't done at least a few races themselves.
That's right. It actually was the first book in English that was a teacher could pick up and go, not just how to orienteer. There were a few of those out, but how to teach my class to orienteer and how to organise them. So something like as simple as an indoor orienteering, you draw a map of your classroom and you'd have little stickers around the place, and then you'd print off an old photocopy, and you draw on all the circles, and the kids would run around, finding the stickers and writing the answer on the box. But a simple thing like doing that with 30 kids was too much. So you'd have half the kids doing something different outside, just in your playground with a few stickers. So you'd half of them outside, half, and swap them. So a lot of it was a very pedagogy focus. This is how to manage your group in doing these activities. Yeah, interesting stuff. Lots.
Yeah, that's right. We did a little bit just as I was leaving school. There was some interest in trying to coach orienteering. And we didn't really know how to go about, I think, making it both interesting enough and easy enough at first for people who were without a navigation background, just to kind of find it rewarding enough to be engaging. Yeah. I think we probably made it just too kind of overwhelming at first. Yeah. And then they weren't really engaged. So it's pretty hard to get that right.
Yeah, it is. You've got to keep it simple and keep it, absolutely. And repetition. So, I did courses in the school classroom 3 or 4 times because I had the little stickers in a different place each time. So it's a lot of work to put that up in your classroom and then get your kids running around. But after you got that, and then you got out into the school grounds and you could use little tiny flags and clippers, they like the clippers, so they got interested in that. And I did that in primary school and in secondary school. So the secondary school kids were just as interested as the primary school ones because it was quite new.
And then you're just extending that to more outdoor environments and then ultimately into kind of a
Go to the
wilderness
park.
or forest.
Yep. Then go to the forest. Yeah. And I took kids. We had a Cumbria schools championship every year. I used to take a group to that and a group to the British schools. And then I used to take a Cumbria group overseas to a 5-day event every year as well. So I took them to Sweden, I took them to Switzerland and Norway and places. Yeah. So they got the hang of it, and they got up to being, W15 orange to red level runners. I had about 10 kids who did that.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then when did you take coaching more fully as kind of more integrated into the club system? And
so
kind of working with federations and stuff, because school coaching is definitely one thing, and then you've somehow got to the stage where you're coaching WOC teams. So
I suppose I was doing it myself at that level, and teaching beginners and intermediates. And then I kept competing in the UK, so I actually didn't I do the odd weekend with the junior squad and help out and stuff, but I didn't do that much with the squad level juniors. I was really more working with the baseline, the beginners, the intermediates, and the teachers of those people. So that was actually my main focus in the UK. So it wasn't until I came here and I decided I wasn't going to do any more World Champ stuff for myself, and I'd go into.
How old were you when you moved to New Zealand?
I was 36 then,
okay.
And I went to the Masters. I thought I'll do the Masters, bit of fun, but So when I came here, it was a chance to do some more work with squads and clubs, and I got quickly absorbed into that system with Rob Garden. Oh yeah, come along, help us do this, that, and the other. So that was good. It was good because, one, there was a gap needed and I had some experience, and also Michael Wood was setting up a coaching thing and coaching coaches, so I was able to bring some into that as well.
What I'm concerned about hearing that is that your movement into coaching juniors has marked the end of your elite career, and I'm looking at myself now and I'm doing too much coaching. Is this the end for me? Is this the end of my elite career?
Yeah, mine was an age thing. I was I thought, I'm too old to do this. I was 36, so different. Yeah, you can do both. You can do both. Yeah, but it depends where you want your energies to be. I think I found it easier to do school level and that kind of coaching and teaching, and to miss out that junior squads group, and then compete myself, than I would, I think, trying to coach the people just behind me.
Okay.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, isn't it? That's just crossed my mind now.
Okay.
That it was fine to coach my school group and focus on them, because it was a different level altogether, and it was about getting a lot of kids participating. Right. And I wasn't coaching anyone who was in the junior squad so much while I was competing. I'd go and do talks to them and stuff like that, but I wasn't doing any one-on-one with anybody like that. Yeah. Yeah.
And you've stayed plugged into that kind of elite level coaching since then?
Yeah, I've actually. I mean, Al and I did a lot with World Champs teams from New Zealand in 97 and 99. Went to Norway with the WOC teams then. Our kids were very small. We were having them just then. By the time I'd had two, it was too difficult. So we then didn't do that. And then we were pretty much doing club stuff with Papo. And as our kids, like most parents do, as our kids moved through, we started doing the stuff that was at their level.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I'd help with Papo weekends, teaching a load of 7, 8, 9-year-olds when our kids were that age. And then I'd move through into the teenagers when they were that age. And then I moved through into teaching our teenagers to run Kiwi sports stuff in our schools. So Papa had a good system one year where we got a grant for it, so we could pay these 16, 17-year-olds to go into primary schools and run stuff. And I was like the overseeing person of that, making sure they were all consistently teaching the stuff that was going to work with those kids. So yeah, that's a lot of coaching of coaches and coaching of different ages and whatnot. Yeah. And then I got back into helping out with that schools team when our kids were in it.
Oh, yeah.
Just because it was something I could do, and my kids didn't seem to mind me being there, so we did that a few years, and Al and I have done it together for a few times, even since our kids have got too old for it. We've done a few of those. Yeah.
Cool. More recently, I've heard that you were writing something.
Yes, separate from orienteering.
Yeah.
I'm writing a book. So I did my master's over the course of all this. It was nothing to do with orienteering. It's about education. I'm into outdoor education, using the outdoors as a space. And I've moved really, I do the pursuits, they're fun, but I've moved from teaching them as a skill to using them as a means to teach something else. So my master's was looking at one trip I do with our students where it's a little bit like a Survivor game. It's as
like the TV show Survivor.
Yeah, it's not as hyped up or same as that. But basically, I won't say too much because it's a mystery for them. It's a surprise for these students. They don't know what's going to happen. And I don't give them much of a briefing, and then I take them away and do all these different activities. And they are in little societies, and they're doing the sorts of things that societies do. And they get quite competitive. And each little activity that we do has a lesson to it. It's a message in it. And at the end, we sort of reveal that, or they get what the lesson is. Oh, that was about that. Oh, yeah, I get that. And what I found with my research was I talked to people who were 15 years ago doing this trip. Up to a year ago, I had 13 participants spread, and they all remembered that trip. And they all had some vivid memory stories to tell about that trip.
So it's quite impactful.
Quite impactful. And they also all said it wasn't just about the fun of the game we were in and the moment, we were out having a lot of fun, and it was summer and the weather was good. They said it was those moments of those lessons that were embedded in the trip. So the sort of society lessons that I'd embedded in the trip, it was like, I realised this. There's actually one I've written an article about. So if anyone is listening who's going to do our course, just turn it on low for this next bit, because what we did was a raft race, and they were building rafts, and I rigged it so some were rich and some were poor, and they had to auction to buy their stuff, and the rich ones were all hogging all the stuff. And one lot got a plastic gun, and the ones with the gun didn't try very hard, and then they shot everyone just before the raft race. And then everyone got really annoyed with them because they'd spot human stuff. So we were able to debrief about rich, poor, equity, charity, and the gun laws. And we spent 2 hours talking about this stuff.
I think what I love about that so much is that you never had to preach to them at any stage. Like it dawns on them. The lesson can be taught without any kind of dogma or listen here, guys.
It's just tertiary education. It's tertiary students. And they get totally into it. And as the trip goes on, they're starting to wonder whether they just play the game and carry on shooting each other or whatever they need to do, or they actually should be forming societies which might function a bit better. So it's quite a Lord of the Flies thing. It's quite a trip. And so that's using the outdoors as an educational tool for society and learning about society. And then we do lots of lessons after that about educational theories and sort of social learning and society theories. But they come to class and they're interested because, what are we doing? Who wrote about this? Oh, I remember when we did that. Who wrote about this? So we learn about all the various authors who've written stuff about that.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's quite...
What's the group of people that are into this? Are these people that are already interested in outdoor stuff?
They're doing an outdoor education degree.
So they've probably got some interest and they're comfortable in the outdoors.
Yeah, very.
Okay, and so you can push the limits a bit.
Very much. And they're learning... Our outdoor degree is sustainability education and outdoor education. And it used to be environmental and outdoors because they go together really well. But we decided to push it a bit further because we thought, actually, we really need to get the sustainability message out. And so it's basically those two things. But we do... So my trip uses the outdoors to get a sustainability message across. And it's the first time that they, in the degree, that they actually start opening those doors. Yeah,
it could be quite hard to teach like environment and conservation without the social sustainability aspect. It's a bit too integrated, too linked.
And it's a bit distant. I think people, it's a good step because it links with the outdoors, the whole environment thing, the whole conservation stuff. We do tree planting and all that stuff. But you then have to get beyond that into what societies and how do they function and which ones are doing the most damage. Quite interesting,
Fascinating.
Yeah. So now going back to the book, so my research was finding that using that trigger created really vivid memories, but also vivid lessons, really impactful lessons, which those people carried on into their practice when they went teachers themselves, and they brought more excitement, engagement, mystery, surprise into their lessons to try and get those bigger messages across.
Okay, so it changed the way that they chose to convey their
or it augmented it. It added to it. And so my book actually, it's got 3 parts to it. That's actually the third section is about using mystery, surprise, engagement, excitement, and all of the seeking system and the brain systems which go with that pleasure pathway. There's all sorts of neural pathways that work on that mystery surprise. So that's actually the third part of my book.
And does that increase engagement, or does it increase the kind of retention?
Both. So it increases engagement and it increases memory, and it increases further interest and further desire to learn. So that's quite all encompassing, if you like.
Yeah, you really need to leverage that to get the most out of education.
But that's the third part of my book. The first part is actually learning about the emotions, because I actually think all kids of high school and primary school need to know a little bit more about how their brains work, how their emotions work, and why that drives them, and why it causes them to do things that are not very nice, and why it causes them to do things that are nice as well, and how to manage that. So that's called About the Emotions, that section. The second section is called For the Emotions, so it's about their own well-being, looking after their own emotions and living with whatever they're getting and being able to cope with that. It's
quite interesting that you've broken it into those sections. I think I went through this personally as well, like learning about emotions, and then there was a steady, I guess, trend towards trying to ignore emotions as being leading me astray and all these other things. And then there was a turnaround point when I realized actually at the end of the day it's emotions that matter actually.
You learn with them.
You actually need to figure out how do you capitalize on the positive emotions and the emotions that you want to be very vigilant of, the negative ones. And sometimes it gets taught maybe a little bit too simply. So that's really cool to hear that there's a chapter about, be wary of your emotions. They will lead you astray. And also your emotions are actually the thing that matters most.
Yeah, so 3 sections. One's about the emotions to learn all that stuff. One's for the emotions to learn that whole management and emotional intelligence and capacity and all that kind of stuff that makes you into a better person to be around. And also there's a future aspect in that, because resilience is going to be needed so much more in the future. So we have to add that in. And then the last bit is pretty much my master's, so it's more about using emotional engagement to get learning, to help facilitate learning that's much deeper and broader and more interesting, and people are more interested. So it's a book that hopefully a teacher would read, or a coach, or a tertiary educator, or an outdoor educator in an outdoor centre, or even, some sort of human resources person in a company might find some of that useful as well. So, it's full of, it will be full of, as well as the theory stuff and the stuff I found out, little examples of activities to run, that help the kids with their emotions.
Are there any trends that you have noticed? If you feel qualified to comment, are there any trends that you've noticed over the years of doing outdoor ed in the kind of people you see? People getting more resilient, less resilient, more savvy with the outdoors?
I think that the places that deliver are trying to now do more what we do, is using the outdoors as a vehicle for lots of other things. So for building self-confidence, and that stuff was always there in the past, but building the ability to relate to others and the looking after the environment and thinking about who you are in society. So those are happening slowly, but it's a little bit of a stretchy elastic, if you like, because there's some places that are still delivering stuff which is teaching people how to paddle a kayak or how to climb a rock, which is great stuff, and you know, it's great for the kids, and it's a good physical thing to do, and they get confident and stuff. But there's places more now trying to embed a whole load of other things in it, and it's a balance. It depends on what course and what your audience are as to how much of what you might put in. So it's definitely maturing, which is great. I think it's got more branches now, because you definitely have an environmental branch, and there's some centres who've got the whole eco-friendly buildings and solar panels and stuff like that, which is fantastic. And then there's other places that have gone down the therapeutic road, and they're working with troubled kids or you know, people coming out of corrections or all sorts of different populations. So they're more looking at the social side. So it's sort of trying to cover all. Yeah.
Cool. And coming back to performance, if someone is, you know, well-rounded in their own emotional state, do you have any advice for how people might try to apply that for training and racing towards performance?
Yeah, I think for
or
me...
even not necessarily like elite performance, but realizing that you can actually improve wherever you're at.
Yes.
Improving the outcome that you're working towards in a sporting context.
So I think that the psychological training aspect of things, and there's quite a lot of content out there about that since the 80s, 90s, is what I call horses for courses. So for some people, you need a lot of that. For other people, you don't need much of that. And people need to know what works for them and what works for them at that time in their life, because what works for them when they're 17 might be different to what works for them when they're 25 or when they're 40. So I think, for example, me when I was 17, I know that another person in our team was really into all that stuff and would sit listening to these motivational tapes, and I'd sort of sit there joining in, and halfway through I'd think, this is not doing anything for me. It doesn't do anything. I need to leave this and just go and have a run around the block or something. So for me, that wasn't at the time, but maybe later that would kick in.
So how did you know that wasn't working for you? What were you noticing on the inside?
Oh, my brain was somewhere else.
Okay.
It wasn't thinking about what the tape was telling me to do.
Yeah.
And
so
for me...
it's not engaging. It's not gearing those pathways in the brain that really pull you into concentration.
Yeah. But for me, what did gear me up, because I'm quite a technical fan, so for me, the old orienteering techniques, looking at a map and going, you know, what technique's going to get me from here to here? And if I went wrong there, what technique would be missing? Okay. That kind of stuff. So it was quite cognitive.
Okay, so you're doing some analytical stuff, and that's...
Yeah.
Can you notice from the inside that suddenly you're more concentrated and less distracted?
Yeah, I'd get in the zone by doing that. But that was me, and that was for orienteering. And I suppose it was the same for a lot of my other sports. So I think about skiing and I think about kayaking. I would be thinking very much technical. Okay. I need to edge this much, or I need to lean this way, or... Because if I did that, then the rest would follow. Yeah. So for me, doing the technical and the flow would come in, the rest would follow. Yeah. Whereas for other people, maybe different things work. Yeah. So I think people have to find what works for them. Yeah. But I also don't think people try the technical thing enough.
Okay.
I think that people could do with, especially kids learning, and I do this a lot at junior camp, is like, what technique are you using to get there? And you know, when they go over a map, I went here, I went there, I went wrong there. I say, well, what technique did you use to get there? And what technique didn't you use because you went wrong? Oh, I got distracted. Okay, you probably did get distracted, but what else didn't you? Oh, well, I didn't actually have my compass properly on my... okay, so think about getting a compass on your map, and then you wouldn't have got distracted by seeing someone because you've been absorbed in getting a compass on your map. So that's me. I'm quite a techie person, and it's interesting. I'm sure more guys would be like that, more men. So I don't know, although women are also, when you look at rock climbers and you look at kayakers and you look at skiers, they don't guts or muscle it through. They need to have the technique, especially climbing. Women get through climbing because they're technically very good. So maybe technique is more of a woman's thing as well. I actually don't know that.
But yeah, at the end of the day, individuals need to work out
what works
for them. I think the tricky bit in communicating this is giving them an outcome, like a green flag. Well, what are they actually looking for to know if something's working for them?
Yeah, and they need to try it. They need to try everything. So by saying, oh, yeah, that doesn't work for me. I mean, I could have said to this other friend, oh, yeah, no, that's not going to work for me. But I sat in the car and listened to the tape to see if it would do anything. At the time.
Gave it an honest...
Yeah, and I thought, no, this isn't going to work for me. So I did other stuff. And I think that juniors, I'm thinking about, particularly because I work with junior camp quite a bit, from their age up through till, right into their elite years, they should be trying out as many techniques as they can.
As much as you feel that your next race is the most important race in the world, it's really not. It's all just a training for another race.
And try something out, try something new, even if it's something you think, oh, well, that won't work for me, try it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one that was interesting for me was about height estimation when you're on a slope doing a downhill leg. This is back to orienteering. Someone gave me a tip and I thought, oh, I've never thought of that before. It was... seeing the height of a tree, it was a big steep Swiss sort of slope, and seeing the height of a tree parallel and going, well, that's 5 meters, so that must be a contour. Right. That kind of very cerebral...
using some natural measurement that appears on the
being
branches
actually
of a tree.
Quite mathematical and systematic, but instead of just saying, oh, I think I'm this far down the slope, actually going, yep, that's one of those, so I'm now down 3 contours from where I was. And I need to contour in here. And sure enough, there it was. And I thought, well, that's interesting.
It's quite systematic.
That's very systematic, and it worked. And no one could argue with it because I'd gone down 3 contours and I knew because of the heights of the trees. Fascinating. So there's an idea that people would just go, oh, you don't need to do that, just move. But in a training exercise or in an event that doesn't matter, on the slope that's got that feature on it, try it.
Yeah.
And you might find it, oh, it didn't work for me, and that's fine. But you might find it works. You know what I mean? So that's what I think people should do more of. And it's partly why in this book, my last section's full of quite random, different things to do, like
this is
the little book of techniques.
Yeah, Jean's
the Jean Cory-Wright book. So this last one's about running along, and you're sort of double navigating. So you're thinking you could be here, but you also could be there, and it's really. I only do that once in a blue moon, but being able to do it is really important. So going and practicing it a few times is in the bag. I remember I've done this before. Yeah, so that's an interesting one, eh?
Cool, yeah. Well, thanks for your time, Jean.
It's cool.
It's been a pleasure to speak to you, and I hope the community enjoy listening to you.
Thank you for taking me on and listening to my story.
If you're enjoying the Perfect Flow podcast and want more value from it in the future, there are some ways you can support it. The first is to rate or leave a positive review on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or other platforms where it's available. The second is to share this podcast or specific episodes on social media or with friends. The third is to get involved more directly through the Perfect Flow page on Facebook, where I'm trying to construct a more interactive community. I want Perfect Flow to belong to the listeners, and if you tell me what topics you're most interested in, or even suggest specific guests, I'll do my best to make it happen. This is your opportunity to be part of something that answers your questions and adds value to your life. Another good reason to follow Perfect Flow on Facebook is that I post links to episodes, blog posts, and anything I find useful to this page. It's a great way to follow my training, racing, and learning. Another great way to stay engaged is to subscribe to genebeveridge.nz. This way you will get podcasts and blogs emailed to you, avoiding the clutter of Facebook. I don't know where this project will take us, but the reception so far has been positive. Who knows where we might be in a few years.